So, what's up, GoRhody Nation? We have a special edition of the GoRhody podcast. We're very lucky to have Mike Luciano. He's a return guest of ours. He's the beat writer for Toronto Raptors, and he's going to be talking today about the status of our favorite player, one in the NBA, roadie player Jeff Dowtin. So, Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. I've been looking forward to this interview.
Well, he's in a very weird situation right now because the Raptors kind of broke with their tradition a little bit. Normally, what they've done, at least the last couple years with Masai Ujiri, is they'll have all their guaranteed players. Then they'll typically have about three-ish spots open or two, and they'll sign like five non-guaranteed players. So that way, all the non-guaranteed guys battle out in the preseason. They'll cut three of them, and then the other two who make it, their contracts get guaranteed the first day of the season. That's typically how they've done it. This year, it's a little bit different because they have all the guaranteed roster spots already filled up already. They have all their two-ways, they have all their Exhibit 10s, they have all their guaranteed spots, and they have one non-guaranteed guy, Jeff Dowtin. So that's why he's in a tough position right now because they pretty much, in order for them to keep him around on the guaranteed roster, they pretty much have to say, all right, even though we're paying this guy X amount for 2023-2024 season, we got to get rid of him and then put Dowtin on. I was kind of hoping that maybe a move would have preceded this, like maybe an Otto Porter trade or something like that, or a Thaddeus Young trade to just clear up a spot, but they haven't done that right now. So, looking at the roster right now, I mean, they clearly like him. I mean, they brought him back. Masai Ujiri in his press conference after firing Nick Nurse specifically mentioned Jeff Dowtin, which, I don't think that was just an accident. I think that was very purposeful when he did that. But just kind of a weird situation right now. He's just kind of floating out there in limbo.
That's amazing how we got to that point because exactly what you said. He seemed to be decisive, insistent is a better word, insistent that Jeff was coming back. But now there's all kinds of different moves. And you did waive Wieskamp, so I thought
They
that
did
was
get
going
rid
to
of
open the door.
Wieskamp. It's also weird too. There's been a bunch of stories that have come out later about the kind of friction. Not that they were, screaming and yelling, but there was some tension between Masai Ujiri and Nick Nurse at the end of the year in terms of, who wanted to play the young guys and who liked this guy and stuff like that. So I'm not sure if Jeff Dowtin was, because originally Ujiri was very high on getting him, but it seemed like he didn't, like Nurse didn't want to play him, and then he did for a little bit, and then he kind of backed off. It seemed like Dowtin was again one of these almost pawns in the Ujiri Nurse like power struggle here, and there's still real no clarity on who kind of the big voice supporting Dowtin was, at least just from what I've seen.
And who was the guy that virtually took, if this happens, and there's still a chance, you're saying? I feel like that.
I'd say there's still a chance. I'm looking at Malachi Flynn right now because right now, if honestly, even though Dennis Schroeder won the World Cup, there's a pretty good chance that I think Scotty Barnes is going to make the move to point guard, and then Schroeder
Really?
becomes. Well, I think that's kind of what they envision for him, and that way Gary Trent Jr. still starts, and they keep all the main starters together. Schroeder becomes like the super sixth man who leads the bench guys. So
Wow.
if that happens, he still has two other point guards that he has to beat out. One of which is Marquise Noel, who's on a two-way contract, so he's probably not going anywhere. They'll just stick him down in the G League if they don't think he's ready yet. If you guys were watching the tournament, you'll know that he was the guy from Kansas State who was, by his own admission, 5'7", so a historically small outlier.
Wow.
But, I mean, goddamn if this guy can't make some amazing passes and just ignite an offense. Like, even in Summer League when he was struggling with shooting, he was just this wizard on pick and roll. So, you got to worry about Marquise Noel. Malachi Flynn is, I think, really the only guy that Dowtin, like if Dowtin beats out Malachi Flynn, I feel like they might end up giving up on him because they had Flynn and Delano Banton as their kind of backup point guard tandem last year, both of which were Masai Ujiri draft picks. And for a period of time, Dowtin had beat out both of them.
Yes.
So he beat out both of them. Delano Banton signed with the Celtics, even though he was a restricted free agent. So the Raptors could have matched, and they said, nope, you're gone. Local guy, Canadian guy, the first Canadian the Raptors ever drafted, and they said, take a hike. go to Boston. So
Wow.
he's gone. Flynn is back for year 4, which again is I still don't know why he's on the team. I mean, I don't even know why he would want to be there or why the team would want him there. It just seems like a fresh start would be better for everyone here because he just has regressed. His minutes have regressed. His shooting never really got to what they thought it would be. The defense, like he's scrappy, but he's limited small wise, like 6'1", so there's only so much
Hmm.
you could really do unless you just have this incredible God-given instinct, which I don't think that he does. Dowtin, if you just compare him to Flynn, he's bigger, not by a lot, but he's
Yeah.
bigger. He's, I think, 6'3". He's
Yep.
definitely faster. And I think just, possession to possession, I think the effort was better with Dowtin. Both of them are not great just creating for themselves scores. I think Flynn probably has a better jump shot right now
Hmm.
than Dowtin, and I think the Toronto, because they need shooting, might value that. But in terms of just from what I saw just last year with Dowtin, him and Flynn are pretty much even. But again, they already guaranteed Flynn's money, so they got to say, we like Jeff Dowtin, but do we like him enough to pay him and pay Malachi Flynn to not pay for us? So that's the hill he's
Wow.
going to climb.
That's hard.
Yeah.
That's extra money to put on the cap. And I think they're still okay with the cap, even if they do that. But
They're right up against it. MLSE, which is Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, they own the Raptors, they own the Maple Leafs. They got their fingers kind of in all the pots of Toronto sports. They're willing to spend money, but they set a very hard line of you will not go into the luxury tax unless it's like the Kawhi Leonard year, like we think we really got something here. So the Raptors are typically just kind of right up until that line, and like they could do it if they wanted to. They could absorb the Flynn's contract and Dowtin, because again, Dowtin's not going to be paid a ton. It's going to be paid almost like league minimum if he makes it guaranteed. So it's not like a huge anchor on the on the balance sheet here, but it's something. It's something they got
yeah,
to worry about, and I don't think that. And I know that Bobby Webster and Masai Ujiri obviously like Jeff Dowtin, but this he is pretty much vying for the number 3 point guard spot behind Dennis Schroeder, who's coming off winning the MVP of the
yeah.
FIBA World Cup with Germany. So they got to decide if all this hullabaloo is going to be worth it for a guy who may not be in the rotation unless somebody gets hurt.
Well, that is, to be honest with you, that sounds a little disappointing, but we'll
It
still go.
it is mostly just because again I liked him, and you want to see guys get rewarded for hard work. And again, there's still time. There's still time.
Hmm.
September 11th, the preseason doesn't start till October 8th. I think is the first game they play in Vancouver against the Kings. Like there's still time to make a move, and they got guys on veteran contracts like Chris Boucher or Otto Porter Jr. or a Thad Young, where they may not even need a player back. They could just take maybe some draft compensation, or if it gets really bad, maybe attach a pick to one of them and just go get out of here. We're going to get your contract off the books. And then things will really open up for Dowtin, because then he's got a roster spot free, and he's obviously would be, even if there's not another non-guarantee guy, he would very clearly be the favorite because he internal knowledge of everything. So
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're not going to give up on
one
that.
other concern though that I have is if Nick Nurse liked him. I mean, Nick Nurse is gone, and they have Darko Rajakovic, who was an assistant with the Grizzlies last year, so we know, and with Oklahoma City before that, so him and Schroeder are buddies. And his system, Nick Nurse he likes shooting. He just didn't have great shooters last year, but it was a lot of we're going to slow it down and play defense and play hard. And
Hmm.
Dowtin really thrived in that. And Rajakovic is going to insist on that too. But part of the reason they hired him from Taylor Jenkins, who's a Mike Budenholzer Bucks disciple,
Hmm.
is we want the offense to get better. We want up and down and fast and shooting. And so if push comes to shove and Dowtin is kind of tied with another player for that last spot, they may go, well, who offers just the best, the highest offensive potential? And it might not be Dowtin, because I think part of Dowtin's value is, as a two-way guy and his on-ball defense and his energy. If they just want a pure shooter or pure scorer, I think that might work against him too.
You said one thing, though, that the speed of his ball handling, that kind of says another thing. If he has a great speed with his ball handling, then he can push the ball up.
He can, but it's just, what does he do if he can't get to the rim? Which I mean,
Yeah.
he can at a decent level, but not at anything. Like if you look at him and then you go watch a guy like Schroeder in the World Cup who he's playing with, like even as much as I like Dowtin, you could see
Yeah.
there's a gulf between those two. And if he doesn't get, if I could offer my advice to Dowtin right now, I'm like, obviously he's been being told this by trainers and stuff like that. He doesn't have to listen to me, but I would just say, just lock yourself in the gym, just threes.
What are threes for a novice like me?
3-pointers.
Oh, 3-pointers. Okay. I thought 3 times a day, 3 practices.
No. 3-pointers, just over and over and over and over and over again. Get that shot locked down, because I think that'll give you kind of a point of difference. Especially because, again, Noel's not going to get cut, but that's one of Noel's problems, is he's not efficient. For all his great passing, he was under 40% pretty much his entire college career. So if you could get that 3-point shot down, maybe the Raptors can just move and shake some stuff around to better accommodate him.
Will they judge that by just seeing him shooting threes in practice? How will he be able to, if he's not on the roster, he won't be able to play in the exhibition games?
It's probably that. I'd imagine too, even if he doesn't make the opening day roster, I'd imagine they'll probably find some way to keep him around in 905 if he still has eligibility left, or keep tabs on him. I think practice is still going to be the best way for Jeff Dowtin to really set himself apart on a kind of a increasingly crowded Raptors bench.
And you would think with the trade, or not the lack of signing of Fred VanVleet, that there would have been a better opportunity, but the way it works sometimes, it's the opposite. And they made too many moves, and their whole makeup of their backcourt is different now in some ways, maybe deeper with their lottery picks and all that, those situations.
I think the plan pretty much all along was eventually to move Scotty Barnes to, I mean, he wants to play point guard. He played point guard in high school. He played point guard in college. Like, I think that was the plan all along. And, I think they just needed Schroeder, because they're like, all right, this bench, even with Dowtin last year, I mean, some of these Rhode Island fans are probably watching some of Dowtin's games. That was not a good bench, even with Dowtin. So they said, all right, let's just get a guy who's a veteran, a consistent scorer. I think he's had double digits for like 8 straight years. Schroeder has. Like, we know he can get points, and that's pretty much all we need of him. Beyond that, though, Dowtin, I think, is still shown enough where there's a chance, especially with Masai Ujiri in that same press conference where we mentioned Dowtin. Because he's a player development guy, and because he knows Toronto is not going to be a big fish free agent destination, he goes, this year is all, development, young guys. He is beating that drum consistently. And I think that's part of why he also hired Rajakovic too, is he has a very strong history of working in the international game and developing talent that way. So they're not just going to, I think, leave Dowtin out to dry. I think they're giving him every opportunity. It's just not an advantageous situation for him, I think, considering how they kind of did him dirty last year too, but they value him to some degree. I think more so than a lot of other teams would value a non-guaranteed point guard.
And we had you on the show last year. As a recap, you were, for our fans who didn't see the show, and I recommend watching it, he was on a 2-way contract, but he wasn't put on the roster for the playoffs.
Correct, because when you sign a 2-way contract, you're not playoff eligible. So they had a chance to say, all right, let's just sign him to an NBA deal for the rest of the season. Maybe that means cutting another guy. Maybe that means moving some stuff around. But if we do that, then we get our backup point guard. They obviously didn't make the playoffs, because then they lost in the play-in to the Bulls in very embarrassing fashion. But that way, if we need him, he's there. And they didn't do that. And I got both schools of thought, which, one of them basically saying, well, if you're depending on Jeff Dowtin in his current state to save your whole playoff rotation, that's dire straits right there. And I kind of agree with that. But, on the other hand, it just didn't make sense, especially with how positively they were talking about him and how positively Dowtin was talking about Toronto.
That Jeff is part of this team, is going to be part of this team in the future. Jeff has been here every day, and I think the overall view of this is Jeff is part of our future.
It's very tough to get a kind of, like, again, I think they like him. It seems like they like him. It's just tough to kind of get a read on him, because they do all sorts of contrasts. We like him, we won't sign him. Part of the future, non-guaranteed. He's got a shot. Other point guards, like it's very herky-jerky, very helter-skelter with how they're kind of handling him.
Now, from my understanding, he has a contract. All they need to do is sign it. Is that wrong?
Well, he has a non-guaranteed
Yeah.
deal for camp. So yeah, it's basically and it's the thing I was saying earlier about what the Raptors do, which is once opening day hits, if he's on the roster, then the money's guaranteed. If he's not, they can just
Yeah.
go, all right, you didn't make the team and you're gone.
I
And
thought I'd have to wait till opening day for that. So, but we may know sooner.
typically they do. I think the last preseason game is like the 22nd or something like that against the Wizards. I think that's the preseason game. I think pretty much right after that, you'll know. And honestly, it could be tough too, because I remember Sam Decker was on one of these deals, the old Wisconsin player. They had him sign like a non-guaranteed deal after he was impressive in, I think, the Turkish league. And he didn't really play in the preseason. Then he comes out in the last game, and I think he hit like 5 threes or something like that. And
Wow.
they still cut him. So they still didn't bring him on. Josh Jackson, the old Kansas guy, had that too. Very impressive in the preseason, but they kind of had their guys.
Mhm.
Didn't end up keeping him. So it's not a guarantee. But again, Dowtin he's not really competing against everybody, because everybody else has already made the team in some respects. So it's just him. So it's not 6 guys competing for 3 spots. It's 1 guy competing for no spots and maybe 1 spot if they really like him. So
They like him.
keep your eyes on Flynn. That'll be the one, I think. I think they'll just say, you know what? We've given this guy 4 years. He's actually older than Gary Trent Jr. Like, development time is over. He's just not going to be it. And then they get rid of him. I think that's the one incision point he'll have.
And you were saying all last year, or a good part of last year, that Dowden outplayed Flynn, and he wasn't supposed to.
I think considerably. And I think part of it was desperation, because Nick Nurse has given Malachi Flynn every chance. And obviously being a first round pick, like, you're just going to get more chances than the average guy, more chances than Doughton's going to get. But I liked what I saw from Doughton a lot more. But number one, consistent. Like, even though he wasn't scoring a lot, he was only playing maybe, 8, 10, 12 minutes. 12 minutes would be a gift for Nick Nurse on that bench. Even though he's playing that much, like, he could say, you know what, I know what I am as a player, and I know what I got to do to help this team. Malachi Flynn's doing all these herky-jerky dribbles and pulling up from 30 feet. It's like, slow down, calm down. Like, I know you want to prove yourself, but that doesn't help anybody here. So, and I give Dowtin a lot of credit in that regard, because that's one of the problems that you'll see this a lot in the NBA, especially too in the preseason, when guys that don't really play a lot, you finally get in the game and they do all kinds of crazy dribbles and crazy pull-up shots to be like, oh, I can actually play. Dowtin's like, all right, I know that's stupid. That's not my game. I'm at least I'm going to play hard defense, because that'll get this coaching staff's attention.
And in college, he was a great defensive player. The only thing lost in his defense was everyone else was great defensive players too. So he was one of Dan Hurley team that cares about defense as much as anyone. Sometimes people thought maybe more than the offense. So Dowtin was a phenomenal defender, but I think it got lost in the shuffle with all the other great defenders on the team. The lockdown defense that they had with Dowtin.
That sounds like Nick Nurse, because after they got Jakob Poeltl last year, from that point on, they were 4th in the league in fewest points allowed. So they were defending well, and part of it's his style too. Because Dowtin, when he gets going, is up your ass all game long as a point guard. And Nick Nurse wanted that. That's part of why he valued Fred VanVleet, I think, more than a lot of Raptors fans who were upset with, the 7 of 20 shooting performances he would put on. That's part of why his confidence never wavered, was the defense. And, obviously Rajakovic is going to care about defense, and he said a bunch of different things about how he kind of wants the defense to operate and stuff like that. But they hired this guy as an offensive guy. He's an offensive coach. He has a history being a good offensive coach in Spain, where he was before he came to the NBA. So that'll be his specialty. And it could either work with Dowtin, where he goes, I don't have to teach you extra defensive stuff. I can give you little offensive tips and tricks. And that finally helps you get on track on that end. Yeah,
that is interesting. Now, his contract was for $3.53 million, or was that incorrect? The contract non-guaranteed.
That he just signed. Yeah, that's what he'll get because he's been in for a couple years, so that's the league minimum for.
Oh, that's the league minimum. Okay, everyone thought that was a significant increase.
The league minimum scales based on how long you're in the league. So if you're in the league for 1 year, your league minimum is lower than if you've played in the league for 5 years.
I wonder what Malachi's is how close it is to.
He signed a rookie scale. I can look that up right now, because he signed a rookie scale deal. He was, again, the end of the first round. in 2020. One pick after Desmond Bain, or one pick before Desmond Bain, who just signed like a $200 million deal. He's 4 years, $10 million, so I think it's $3.8 million base salary. So financially, they're very similar. But again, maybe Ujiri is maybe there's some ego in it too. Malachi Flynn's one of Ujiri's guys, and he's like, my guys eventually it'll click. Because I mean, that's happened before with the Raptors. I mean, Norman Powell was like in and out of the rotation for like 4 years, and then he finally had those crazy years right during the championship and after, where we were scoring 20 a game. So I mean, it happens, but I don't know. I have a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach that's what Ujiri is going to do to Dowtin. I hope that's not true though. And part of the Dowtin love, if I'm being honest, too, part of it was just the bench was so bad and in such dire straits that anybody that didn't just slip and fall on the floor and hurt themselves when they came into the game was like, oh, hey, we got a guy finally. So, that was part of it. But again, fans, especially Toronto fans too, they're always going to respect heart and hustle and trying hard. And there were times last year, especially, where it seemed like things were disjointed and very, very clicky, and this guy's not getting along with this guy. And when these two guys are on the floor, the offense kind of stalls. So, to kind of get a break from all that and just see a guy, go 120% all the time, I think he really endeared himself more so than even a lot of the other, scrappy non-guaranteed guys did. Like Yuta Watanabe, the former Japanese one who just signed a deal with the Suns. He went to Brooklyn after the Raptors, so he went Raptors, Brooklyn, Suns. He was like that too, where originally, like he was a shooter in college, but when he came to the Raptors, his big thing was, I'm just going to be a super versatile 6'9" wing who steals and blocks and guards everybody. And fans loved him for it. And then he eventually developed a pretty good 3-point shot to go along with it. Now, eventually they couldn't keep him and he had to go along anyway. But maybe that's the Dowtin developmental pipeline, is he ends up coming on with defense. The offense finally clicks. And then even if it's not with the Raptors, he just shows enough where some team, like Brooklyn did with Watanabe, just says, we'll give you kind of a more proper deal and a more defined role.
Wow. Well, this answered a lot of questions, and I'm glad, because there's a lot of people who want to know this. And thanks again, Mike, for coming on. I have a great understanding of this. I'm not going to give up hope. One other question: is there any other teams? I know you follow the Raptors more than anyone, but is there anyone on the radar, knowing the NBA as well as you do, that would work for him?
It's tough just because, when you're looking at that 14th and 15th, those final roster spots, like position becomes less important. And a lot of times they're just taking gambles on, guys who had productive college careers, maybe guys who have a connection with an old assistant coach who moved to a new spot. And he's like, oh, I know this guy. He's good. We can work with him. It becomes less about maybe just finding a role and more about, let's just roll the dice, like the Raptors did with Dowtin on a two-way deal. I mean, he hadn't really proven anything in the NBA at that point, but they kind of liked what they saw. So I don't think there's one specific team who would be clamoring for Dowtin, though. But looking around the league, I'm sure there could certainly be a contender who looks at a guy who's got good size for a point guard, and he hustles and he defends and he passes well, and he's not going to rip the rim off the rim like Darryl Dawkins. He's not going to be that sort of athlete, but just he's very quick and very explosive in that way, getting up and down the floor. He could be good off ball because he's a good cutter. I'm sure there's a team that could find him and be like, all right, if we just teach this guy to shoot, like if you have a good infrastructure around you like that, I don't see why he couldn't catch on somewhere else.
Now, if assuming the worst case scenario and he doesn't find a team, what are his choices then? Does he have to go to Europe, or does he just hang around? And there'll be injuries.
There will be. Europe would probably be the best for him. China could also work too. China is a little different too, because typically they have a limit. I think it's like 3 or 4 you can have non-Chinese players on a team. And a lot of times they've even said, like Stephon Marbury said this a lot too, like they will a lot of times lean specifically on they call them imports on the imported players. So Dowtin, I remember Jimmer Fredette was getting like 40 a game over there, so that could be good for his numbers. And I mean, we've seen a lot of guys struggle in the NBA, go to China, play well in China, and then come back. Europe might also work too. Europe is a little bit of a different game. It's a little more. China's a lot faster actually than here. It's a lot of up and down really quick. The scoring is very crazy there a lot. Europe's a lot more methodical and slowed down. A lot more like precise, just from a play design standpoint. So I think it really would just be 6 and 1, half a dozen the other. As long as he gets paid well and as long as he gets a chance to get some good games on film for teams, I feel like Europe or China might be the best bet.
Could he hang around the G League? And
I'm not 100% sure if he's eligible because you run
Okay.
out after a certain time. But I
Sure.
would need to check that. But he could if he is eligible. I'm just not sure.
well, this has been great. One thing I know he won't be going is to Russia, and I wouldn't let that happen. I would, even though I don't know him personally. I did. That's just they
Yeah,
play
I'd
very
put
well, I
that
guess.
down on the I'd put that down on the priority list right now. If you're
Yeah.
a basketball player looking overseas, maybe not. Don't make Russia your first choice. I'd say maybe make it number 4 or 5 or something. I don't know.
I always send this to end the podcast. I'd like you to subscribe if you like the show, comment, like, hit the bell. And if you didn't like the show, don't say anything. How's that for a deal? Once again, Mike, great knowledge. Everyone's gonna just eat this up. I'll take care of Mike, and we'll stay in touch. And I could see you coming back shortly with the way things are with this.
Let's see how it goes. I don't know.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
See you.
thanks again.